Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another stupendous installment of Weekend Update. From very, very high above all the perfidious forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Saturday, a typical spring day in Wyoming. If you don't like the weather, just hang around for a few minutes. It'll change. Under any other circumstances, during any other season, we would say that this is a pretty dreary day, but being as it's spring and it's not January 22nd, we all know that the sun is going to come out in a few days. Just have to wait around a little bit. Fortunately, my friends, my political predictions are quite a bit more accurate than my meteorological ones. It all comes from having a keen eye and knowing the difference, not between what is right and wrong, but between right and almost right. I wish I could take credit for that one, but it comes from 18th century theologian Charles Spurgeon. That's how he defined discernment. And I'm telling you, my friends, my political discernment has been honed to a fine edge. It comes through experience and just plain old paying attention and listening. I choose to listen to what these people say, and it's only through doing that you can really figure out what they're planning to do, because most of the time, they're honest about it. By honest, I don't mean that they sit everybody down and say, okay, Republicans, here's our game plan. No, they don't do that. But what they do, pun intended, is they telegraph their next move. Generally speaking, it comes out in the form of accusing Republicans of what they themselves are actually doing. Take, for example, this Sheridan Press story that I've been covering for the last week. Oh, and there's a fascinating development. I'll get to that in just a second. But last Friday, the Sheridan Press spuriously claimed that the Sheridan County Republican Party had not noticed their March 31st election meeting in the paper of record, which is the Sheridan Press. And this is how crazy it is, and you can't make this stuff up, but the Sheridan Press printed that claim directly beside the legal notice that the Sheridan County Republican Party was statutorily required to publish about their meeting. I'm not kidding, my friends. They were right beside each other. Here's what the plan was. In that same piece, the one that was lying about the Sheridan GOP, there was a list of candidates running for leadership offices in the Sheridan GOP. As with most county parties in Wyoming, there are the conservatives, and then there are the redcoats, the people who are really Democrats that register as Republicans so that they can get elected. For the past 4 elections, that is 8 years, conservatives have been in control of the Sheridan County Republican Party. And I'm telling you, the redcoats are desperately trying to take the party back. So here's the plan, or was the plan, before I exposed their absolutely sophomoric attempt at deception, that is. But here's their plot anyway. The Sheridan Press publishes a libelous article claiming that the GOP doesn't know what they were doing and completely fouled up an election. And they didn't meet the statutory deadline, even though they absolutely did. And while I'm at it, let me just define what that word libel means. To the 1828. Now, this one is a little bit long, but it's interesting. And I quote, any book, pamphlet, writing, or picture containing representations maliciously made or published, tending to bring a person into contempt or expose him to public hatred or derision. The communication of such defamatory writing to a single person is considered in law a publication. It is immaterial with respect to the essence of a libel whether the matter of it is true or false, since the provocation and not the falsity is the thing to be punished criminally. But in a civil action, and this is probably the most pertinent part, a libel must appear to be false as well as scandalous. End quote. On face, and literally on the same page, what the Sheridan Press printed is absolutely false. Here's the second qualification. According to Webster, the whole plan was to give campaign fodder to the Redcoats to be used in the upcoming GOP election. That way, they had something written in the paper to wave around and try to convince people that the current leadership didn't have any idea what they were doing, and they endangered the election by not printing a public notice in time to actually have an election, even though all of it wasn't true. There you have the scandalous part of what Webster was talking about. So, yes, what the Sheridan Press printed was absolutely libelous. The second part of the plan is if the Redcoats lost, which they're going to, they would again wave around that March 21st issue of the Sheridan Press and claim that the election wasn't valid because it hadn't been properly noticed. Now, of course, that claim wouldn't go anywhere. Because it's bullcrap from the very beginning, but their point would not be to win the election. It would be to create chaos, to call into question the integrity of the leadership of the Sheridan GOP. Back to the Sheridan Press. Their hope is that their involvement would really kind of go unnoticed. And then at some point in the future, after all of this has blown over, they could issue a retraction that said something to the effect of, "In our March 21st edition of the paper, we said that the Sheridan GOP hadn't properly noticed their meeting. Upon further examination, we've decided that indeed they did notice their meeting. We apologize for the inaccuracy and we'll do better in the future," etc., etc. Post-retraction, the Sheridan Press would be in the clear and no one would be the wiser. What they didn't count on is my keen observational skills and how much I absolutely detest the lying media. Sources very close to the Wyoming Press Association told Cowboy State Politics that after this past Monday's episode, in which this whole thing was exposed, the Wyoming Press Association recommended to the Sheridan Press that they immediately produce a retraction. And I personally offered to the Sheridan Press, via a conversation with the Sheridan County GOP Chairman Brian Miller, that if the Sheridan Press produced a retraction and printed it on the front page above the fold, that I would allow the proverbial Cowboy State Politics guns to go silent. On this matter, anyway. Well, not that I would forget. No, I wouldn't do that. But at least for the time being, I would drop the matter. And who says that I'm not interested in honest ceasefires? Rubbish. Needless to say, the Sheridan Press did not take me up on my offer, and they didn't follow the recommendation of the Wyoming Press Association either. But they did print an article on the front page above the fold. Now, it's not a retraction, to get that thought out of your head. The best way to describe it, though, is it's one of those apology, non-apology type of things. Political apologia, as I've told you about before on the program, how to admit that you did something without saying you're sorry for it. Yeah, it's one of these type of deals.
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is. Yes.
Laughable at best and completely dishonest at worst. I'll continue with the Sheridan Press's apology, non-apology in just a second. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. Have you been paying attention to the weather? Yeah, have you? Have you noticed that it's still going to snow? It's still March, and we haven't even got to April yet, which means in Wyoming, there's plenty of more snowstorms coming. Before you venture out in them, you need to make sure that you have a pair of Buffalo Wool Company socks. That way, your toes will stay nice and toasty warm, no matter what Wyoming's weather is going to throw at you. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you are not going to be disappointed.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org.
Many Americans are growing increasingly concerned about the rapidly growing U.S. government deficits, recognizing the additional printing of paper money devalues U.S. currency. To compensate, American gold and silver coins will provide wealth protection. U.S. Coin Capital provides physical gold and silver coins delivered directly to our clients. You can reach us at 1-800-878-2646, uscoincapital.com.
And by the way, that was Fred Deshefsky in that ad you just listened to. He's the owner of U.S. Coin Capital. I did an interview with him recently in which we talked about, in his opinion, is there any gold left in Fort Knox? It's a great interview, and I'm going to publish it sometime next week, so make sure that you stay on the lookout for it. I'm thinking it'll probably be published on Wednesday. In fact, that sounds like a really good idea. Let's just go ahead and do that. Really, in Wyoming, there are only two seasons, winter and construction, and we're getting pretty close to being in the middle of the second one. If you're going to be doing any construction on your property, the two people you should talk to first are Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. They are the experts in metal building construction. They've been doing it longer than anybody else around, and they definitely do a much better job. So give them a call, 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the podcast. That way you can be notified every single time there's a brand new episode of Cowboy State Politics. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. And now, back to the program. Before the break, I was telling you about how the Sheridan Press issued an article today on the front page above the fold in an attempt to convince you that it was really a retraction. Actually, it's the exact opposite of what a retraction is supposed to be. Let me read you a couple pieces out of this thing. And I quote, March 31st was listed on the county party's website as a backup date for the March 22nd meeting. The party paid for and published an advertisement in the March 21st edition of the Sheridan Press to notify Sheridanites of the Central Committee meeting scheduled for March 31st. After doing some research, Wyoming Press Association attorney Chris Wages told the Sheridan Press that the advertisement satisfied the party's notice requirement. Quote, it can be run as an ad, it just needs to be published and identified, end quote, Wages wrote in an email to the Sheridan Press. Advertisements are purchased with the press's marketing staff. The Sheridan Press newsroom and marketing staff do not coordinate on any news content, and listen to this last part, to maintain strict ethical standards, end quote. There's nothing ethical about what the Sheridan Press has been doing with this matter. And secondly, which party decides where an advertisement is printed in a paper? Let's see here. Gee, I don't know. Maybe, this is a toughie. Oh, I know. It's the Sheridan Press. And don't you think that maybe before making a claim that the party failed its statutory obligations, that you might check to see if they actually did publish a notice? Nope, not the Sheridan Press. Not when that information would be in conflict with the paper's own political ideology and ambitions. Listen to this next part, and I quote, information requiring a public notice include a name change, notices of foreclosure, and board member elections, among many others. The Sheridan County Republican Party's notices do not fall under that specific statutory requirement. The deadline for submitting legal notices in the Sheridan Press is typically 9 a.m., 3 days before the notice running. A legal notice in a Friday edition would need to be submitted by 9 a.m. Tuesday, end quote. Now, first of all, I don't know about their deadlines, and I really don't care. But let me translate this for you. We sent an email Thursday to the Sheridan County Republican Party saying that we had received their ad and that it was going to be printed. But because the deadline for public notices is Tuesday. Then the ad that was submitted by the Republican Party isn't a public notice. So really, we told the truth in that bullcrap article we printed on March 21st last Friday. That's what they want you to believe. But allow me to read for you the passage in question from their March 21st edition of the Sheridan Press. And I quote, as of 9 a.m. Friday morning, the party had not filed a public notice with the Sheridan Press to notify Sheridanites of its public meeting schedule for March 31st. According to the article you just published in the paper, the party doesn't have to. They just have to advertise it, which they did right next to the article that I'm reading from. But anyway, allow me to continue, which would mean the party failed to meet its deadline, end quote. So the article published in the March 29th edition of the Sheridan Press addresses the first part of that paragraph, that indeed it doesn't qualify as a public notice, regardless of if the party actually has to file a public notice, which they don't, but it does not address the last sentence of that paragraph, that being that the party didn't meet its deadline, which they absolutely did.
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is. Yes.
So what is printed in the Sheridan Press this morning is the farthest thing from a retraction, because it doesn't address the central problem with the first article printed on March 21st. That is, that the Sheridan Republican Party didn't meet its statutory obligations. The Sheridan Press is splitting hairs in an attempt to convince you that they didn't do anything wrong. The truth is, they printed something that was absolutely false, and now they're trying to convince you that what they did was right. It's not a public notice. You're right, it's not, because the Wyoming Republican Party is a private organization and they're not subject to quote-unquote public notices. But let me tell you what it is. It is an advertisement that is absolutely in line with what Title 22 says, that you have to tell the public 10 days in advance of the election of the Central Committee's officers. The Sheridan GOP did meet their statutory deadline, and the Sheridan Press should print a retraction and admit it. Moving on real quick before I let you go for this morning. There was a recent piece published by Wyoming Public Radio entitled, "One Lawmaker Debriefs His First Legislative General Session," in which they were interviewing Representative Tom Kelly. Now, I personally like Tom Kelly. I think that he did a great job in this legislative session, and I think that he represented his constituents admirably. He's a little too libertarian for me, but honestly, we only disagree on a couple of minor points, and one of those showed up in this piece. And I quote, "With the legislature's off-season or interim underway, Kelly said he's already learned through conversations with some of his constituents that they were disappointed in his votes on certain bills. For example, Kelly, a self-described libertarian, and he is, by the way, voted against HB64, which restricts medication abortion access through a transvaginal ultrasound requirement. Pregnant Wyomingites seeking abortion pills now need to have an ultrasound procedure and wait 48 hours before their physicians can prescribe them the pills to end their pregnancies. Governor Mark Gordon rejected that bill, but the legislature voted to override him. Kelly joined 15 other representatives in dissenting against the override vote. Quote, I had an issue with HB64 violating Plank 10 of the Republican Party platform, which says, very bluntly, under no circumstances ever will the state mandate any medical procedure, modality, or whatever, he said. I couldn't reconcile in my head that HB64 was doing just that. That an ultrasound is a form of health care, and it is a health care procedure. Now, Plank 10's exact wordings under the subheading of liberty in the Republican Party platform says, quote, no medical procedure, modality, or treatment should ever be mandated under any circumstances. End quote. Here's the problem I had with that. And Representative Kelly and I did kind of debate this back and forth after the vote, but here's my issue with it. Nobody is mandating that anybody have an elective abortion. That is a choice. And what HB64 says is if you make that choice, then you have to have an ultrasound. And by the way, the bill doesn't contain the word transvaginal at all. In this procedure, it could be a transvaginal ultrasound, or it could not be a transvaginal ultrasound. But regardless of whatever type of ultrasound it is not a mandate. Similarly, there is no mandate that everyone has to drive. But if you make the choice to drive, it is mandated that you carry insurance. And so, logically, carrying insurance is also a choice because you chose to drive. And with HB64, getting the ultrasound is a choice because you chose to get an abortion. It is not a mandate and therefore does not violate Plank 10 of the Republican Party platform. Not to mention the first plank of the platform that says that Republicans believe in life from conception to natural death. So the stance that Representative Kelly was taking kind of violates that first one too. But I'm going to try to get Representative Kelly on so that we can debate this back and forth on the program. I'll see him March 31st at the Sheridan GOP meeting that was noticed in the paper and did satisfy the requirements of Title 22 in the Wyoming statutes, no matter what the Sheridan Press says. Well, that'll do it for today's installment of the program. Have a good rest of your weekend, and we'll talk again on Monday. Now, I got to tell you, my friends, it's a heck of a lot of fun living rent-free in the heads of the editorial staff at the Sheridan Press. It's a heck of a lot of fun. But anyway, for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics.